Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into the world of group 13 elements.
That's right. Boron, aluminum, gallium, indium, and thallium.
Yeah, sounds like a chapter list, but trust us, this is going to be your shortcut to really getting these elements. Lots of surprising stuff here.
Absolutely. Our mission today is basically to break down Chapter 13 from Shriver Atkins Inorganic Chemistry. We'll hit the essentials, then dive into the really cool details about these elements and their compounds.
And we're doing this audio only, so we'll make sure you can picture everything, no visuals needed. You'll get the whole story from atomic quirks to, real-world uses.
Think of it as the fast track to understanding this key bit of the periodic table.
Okay, so group 13, it's got this amazing range, right? From boron, which is, well, kind of non-metallic.
All the way down to thallium, which is definitely a heavy metal.
And we'll track the trends, things like oxidation states, how they can act as acids or bases. And boron's chemistry is just wild, especially those cluster compounds.
Definitely some aha moments coming up. You'll see how they're all linked, even though they seem so different.
All right, let's start with the basics, the elements themselves.
Okay, first up, abundance. How common are they?
Well, aluminum is everywhere, like 8% of the Earth's crust, mostly in bauxite, super abundant.
But boron? Not so much.
No, way less common, found in things like borax. It's actually kind of interesting, this scarcity of light elements like boron, lithium.
Right, it points to how stars make elements, nucleosynthesis. These light guys got sort of skipped over.
Exactly. So that difference in abundance kind of sets the stage. Boron is our non-metal here.
And aluminum, mostly metallic, but it has that amphoteric character, reacting as an acid or a base. So sometimes it's called the metalloid.
Then gallium, indium, thallium, they're clearly metals.
And this change, non-metal to metal, you see in the bonding too. More covalent up top with boron, more ionic down below as it gets easier to lose electrons.
And didn't you mention a weird quirk with gallium?
Ah, yes, the alternation effect. Gallium is actually more electronegative than aluminum, which is totally against the trend you'd expect. Chemistry loves to surprise you.
Keeps us on our toes. Okay, so boron. First in the group, small atom. Really stands out.
It really does. And it has that diagonal relationship with silicon over in group 14.
Meaning their chemistry is surprisingly similar in some ways.
You got it. Both form acidic oxides, B2O3 and SiO2.
Mm-hmm.
Both make lots of polymeric oxide structures, like glasses.
Oh, right, like Pyrex glass.
Exactly. And they both form flammable gaseous hydrides,
Yeah.
totally different from aluminum hydride, which is a solid.
Okay, what about how they react? Oxidation states.
Good question. They all have that ns2-np1 electron configuration, 3 valence electrons.
So you'd expect +3.
And you often see that, especially for aluminum. But as you go down the group, the +1 state becomes more and more stable.
Ah, the inert pair effect.
That's the one.
Yep.
Those two electrons just don't want to get involved in bonding as much in the heavier elements. For thallium, TLI is actually the most common state.
And that has serious consequences, right? You mentioned thallium poisoning.
Yes, it's a crucial point. TLI ions are almost the same size as potassium and sodium ions. So they basically sneak into cells, disrupt transport, intensely poisonous.
Wow. A chilling reminder of how small atomic details have huge biological impacts.
Absolutely.
So what do these elements actually look like? Boron.
Boron's interesting. It could be an amorphous brown powder or these really hard, shiny black crystals.
And those crystals have that special structure.
Yeah, often featuring an icosahedral B12 unit. Think of a 20-sided die or like a tiny molecular soccer ball made of 12 boron atoms. That icosahedron pops up all over boron chemistry.
Cool.
Right.
Aluminum. We know it as metal foil cans.
Right. It's actually a very reactive metal, technically.
Yeah.
But it instantly forms this super thin, tough layer of aluminum oxide on its surface.
The passivation layer.
Exactly. It protects the metal underneath. If you scratch it off, boom, it oxidizes fast.
What about gallium? You said it had weird properties.
Oh, yeah. Gallium's fun. Brittle when cold, but melts at just 30 degrees Celsius, like 86 Fahrenheit. Barely above room temp.
So it melts in your hand.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it has one of the widest liquid ranges known. Only mercury and cesium beat it. It also wets glass and skin, spreads right out, makes it a bit tricky to handle.
And indium and thallium.
They're softer, more like typical metals in their appearance and feel.
Okay, so we've met the elements. Now for the compounds, this is where the action is, right?
Definitely. This is where their chemistry really shines. Remember that electron configuration? 3 valence electrons.
Means they often end up with only 6 electrons around them in compounds, an incomplete octet.
Precisely. And that makes them electron deficient? They want more electrons. So they act as Lewis acids electron pair acceptors.
Okay, example. Boron hydrides, or
Ah,
boranes.
Perfect example. The simplest one, diborane, B2H6. It's electron-deficient. Its structure is famous.
The banana bonds.
Hey. Yeah, the three-center, two-electron bridging bonds, two electrons holding three atoms together. It's not just regular bonds, but these BHB bridges. You see these bridges a lot in borane chemistry.
And they have that characteristic green flame?
Yep, when they burn. And some are pyrophoric, catch fire spontaneously in air, handled with care.
Okay, moving to boron trihalides. BF3, BCl3.
Right. These are trigonal planar molecules, flat triangles.
And Lewis acids too? But there's that weird trend you mentioned?
Ah, yes, the mind bender. You'd think BF3 would be the strongest Lewis acid, right? Fluorine pulling electrons away like crazy.
Makes sense.
But nope, it's the weakest Lewis acid of the bunch. BCl3 is stronger, BBr3 stronger still, Bi3 is the strongest.
How does that work?
It's internal pi bonding. Fluorine's lone pairs can actually donate back into boron's empty orbital. This back bonding is best with fluorine because it's small and its orbitals overlap well.
So the back bonding stabilizes the boron, makes it less hungry for outside electrons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It reduces the Lewis acidity. It's a fantastic example of how subtle electron effects can completely flip expectations based just on electronegativity.
Very cool. What about boron with oxygen and nitrogen?
Boron oxide, B2O3. Key stuff. Dehydrate boric acid, you get this. It's crucial in borosilicate glass pyrex
Black Pyrex.
because the BO bonds are super strong. This gives the glass low thermal expansion. It doesn't crack easily when you heat it up or cool it down fast. Essential for lab stuff and cooking dishes.
Makes sense. And boron-nitrogen compounds.
Really fascinating. The BN unit is isoelectronic with a CC unit. Same number of valence electrons.
So they make similar structures to carbon compounds.
Often, yes. Boron nitride, BIN. There's a form that looks just like graphite, layers of atoms. It's slippery like graphite, a good lubricant.
But it's not black and conductive.
Nope, it's white, an electrical insulator. Very stable at high temperatures, too, so it's used as a refractory material. Squeeze it hard enough, it turns into cubic BN, almost as hard as diamond.
Wow. And borazine.
B3 and 3H6. The inorganic benzene. Looks just like benzene, same structure, colorless liquid.
But chemically different.
Oh, yes. The BN bonds are polar, unlike CC bonds. Makes borazine react quite differently than benzene.
Okay, what about the heavier guys? Aluminum, gallium, indium, thallium compounds.
They follow some similar patterns. Electron-deficient, Lewis acids. Aluminum alloys, of course, are everywhere.
Yeah.
Light, strong, resist corrosion, recyclable. Cans, planes, building materials.
You mentioned alloying aluminum with gallium earlier.
Right, it messes up that protective oxide layer, makes the aluminum react vigorously with water, releasing hydrogen. Potential fuel source, maybe, but it takes energy to make the alloy.
What about aluminum hydride?
AlH3. It's a solid, a polymer, different from gaseous debris.
And the trihalides,
Yep.
MX3.
Yep, all form them. But remember that the inert pair effect down the group +1 becomes more stable, so thallium, I halides, TLX are quite stable and common.
How about the +3 halides, like AlCl3?
AlCl3, JACCL3, NCl3, great Lewis acids. In vapor or solution, they often form dimers, M2X6. Picture two MX3 triangles sharing halogen atoms as bridges.
Like diborane, but with halogens bridging instead of hydrogens?
Sorta, yeah. Creates a tetrahedral setup around each metal. And they're oxides. Alpha-alumina, Al2O3, corundum. Add impurities, you get sapphire or ruby, incredibly hard, high melting point.
And alums.
Right, those double salts like KLS4, 2.1F2O, contain the hydrated aluminum ion, used for ages as mordants to help dyes stick to fabric.
Okay, let's switch gears to something really unique about boron, those cluster compounds. Cages.
Yes. Boron is the king of clusters. It forms these amazing, extensive cage-like structures, with hydrogen, with metals, even with carbon.
You mentioned 3 types of borohydrides, based on ship.
That's right, based on their structure and electron count. First, closed structures, then closed. Perfectly formed polyhedra, like that B12 icosahedron. Very stable. Formula BNHN2.
Okay, closed cages. What's next?
Mesostructures, think nest. They look like a closo cage that's had one corner popped off. Formula BNHN+4. They have an opening. Moderately stable.
Got it. Nest-like. And the third?
Arachnostructures. Think spider web. Even more open, more fragmented. Formula BNHN+6 tend to be pretty unstable, quite reactive.
Closo, nido, arachno, closed, nest, web. Cool.
And it's not just boron and hydrogen. You get metallaboranes metals incorporated into these clusters.
And carboranes, boron and carbon together in a cage.
Exactly. And here's a neat concept. A BH unit is isolobal with a CH unit.
Isolable.
Means they have similar frontier orbitals, similar bonding capabilities. So you can often swap a BH for a CH in these clusters, and the overall structure stays similar. It extends the rules we use to understand them.
That's powerful. Okay, let's talk applications and reactions. How do we get these elements?
Well, aluminum extraction is famous, the Héroult process. Dissolve bauxite in molten cryolite, zap it with electricity, very energy intensive.
And the others? Gallium, indium, thallium.
Often side products from refining other metals. Gallium from aluminum production, indium from zinc, thallium from lead. Usually isolated by electrolysis too.
No uses. Boron, besides Pyrex.
Borax, water softener, cleaner, big use. Boron's also a micronutrient for plants. Boron filaments make composites stronger. Think aerospace, fancy golf clubs.
In those super hard compounds.
Civic boron nitride, yeah. Tough stuff. Used in cutting tools instead of diamond sometimes. Sodium perborate, that's a bleach, but chlorine-free. Used in laundry soaps, even teeth whiteners.
Okay, aluminum, we know it's everywhere.
The king of non-ferrous metals. Light, resists corrosion thanks to that oxide layer. Super recyclable. Cans, foil, window frames, planes, and its compounds. Mordants, water treatment, antacids.
Gallium, besides melting in your hand.
High-temp thermometers. Gallium nitride, GaN, huge for blue LEDs and lasers. Blu-ray players depend on it. Also used in tough solar cells for satellites. And gallium arsenide, GaAs, a key semiconductor, faster than silicon for some high-frequency electronics like in cell phones. Indium tin oxide ITO, that transparent conducting coatings on your phone screen, your laptop display, touch panels. Essential tech. Can even coat planes to make them stealthy.
Wow. And thallium, mostly the poison aspect.
Historically, yes. Rat poison, ant killer. Banned now, thankfully. Because TLI mimics potassium and sodium ions, messes up nerve function. But now, used carefully in nuclear medicine for imaging tumors. A good example of harnessing a dangerous element.
Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into some key reactions. Diborane again.
Right, B2H6. Besides being flammable, it undergoes hydroboration. Super important in organic chemistry. You add HBUB across a double or triple bond. Allows chemists to build complex molecules.
And the borohydride ion, BH4.
Found in things like sodium borohydride, NaBH4. It's a fantastic reducing agent, adds hydrogen to other molecules. Milder than some others. Really useful in the lab.
Boron trialides again, besides Lewis acids. What else?
They react readily with things like water or alcohols protolysis. Breaks them down to boric acid. They're also key starting points for making organoboron compounds.
And boric acid itself.
It's a weak acid, but acts mainly as a Lewis acid, accepting OH from water to form BOH4. In concentrated solutions, it can link up, polymerize, and sodium perborate, the bleach. Its structure actually has peroxide units, O22, bridged by boron. That's where the oxidizing power comes from.
Boron, nitrogen again, any other cool stuff?
Amine boranes. Analogs of hydrocarbons like H3 and BH3 is like ethane. They're being looked at for boron neutron capture therapy, a way to target cancer cells.
Interesting. And metal borides.
Magnesium diboride, MgB2, discovered as a superconductor just back in 2001. Relatively cheap, simple structure layers of boron like graphite with magnesium in between. Huge potential for superconducting wires, magnets.
A simple compound with amazing properties. Now those clusters again, Wade's rules. Sounds important.
Oh, they were revolutionary back in the 70s, a way to predict the shape of these boron clusters just by counting electrons.
How does it work, basically?
You count skeletal electrons in a specific way. Each BH unit gives 2, each H gives 1, add electrons for negative charge. Then, the total number of electron pairs tells you the structure type.
So N+1 pairs means?
Closo, a closed cage, stable.
N+2 pairs.
Nido, the nest-like structure, one vertex missing from the closo shape.
N+3 pairs.
Arachno, the spiderweb structure, even more open, less stable.
So electron count directly predicts geometry. That's elegant.
It really is, based on molecular orbital theory. And these clusters aren't static, they react. Lewis bases can break them open, they can be deprotonated, and you can even build bigger clusters from smaller ones.
And this applies to carbarenes too, with carbon in the mix.
Yep, because BH is isolobal with CH. Carbarenes are often very stable. You can even do chemistry on the carbon atoms, like attaching other groups. Some nidocarborane anions act like ligands, forming sandwich compounds with metals, similar to famous organometallic compounds like ferrocene.
Amazing versatility. What about hydrides of the heavier elements? Aluminum, gallium?
Aluminum hydride, AlH3, is a polymer. The alkyl derivatives, like Al2ET4H2, have those 3-center 2-electron Al-HL bridges, similar to diborane. Gallium hydride, G2H6, is much less stable, only made recently. indium and thallium hydrides, even more unstable.
That their complex hydrides are important.
Absolutely. Lithium aluminum hydride, LiAlH4, and LiGaH4. Powerful reducing agents, much stronger than AbH4. LiAlH4 reacts violently with water. You have to be careful.
Okay, back to the trihollies, MX3, LCl3, and friends.
Their Lewis acidity is interesting. Towards hard bases like oxygen donors, it goes algo in, decreases down the group.
But towards soft bases, like sulfur donors.
It increases. GaLb depends on the partner. LCl3 is hugely important as a Friedel-Crafts catalyst in organic synthesis.
And thallium halides, remember TLI3.
Right. It's not TLA3 iodide, it's TLI triiodide, TLO plus I3, because TL3 is easily reduced by iodide. Shows that +1 stability again.
So the +1 state gets really important down there.
Definitely. Halides are unstable. But GaI and I, and especially TLI, halides are much more stable. Things like JCl2 aren't really Ga. They're mixed GaI and Ga3. TLI halides are stable in water. TLI is used in some detectors.
Oxides, besides alumina.
Indium tin oxide, ITO, we mentioned it, transparent conductor, critical for displays, touchscreens, solar cells. It's N2O3 doped with tin oxide.
And the semiconductors, group 13 with group 15.
Yes, like gallium arsenide, GaAs. Isoelectronic with silicon and germanium, but often with better properties like higher electron speed.
Yeah.
Great for high-frequency devices. Also gallium nitride, GaN for LEDs.
Okay, nearly there. Zintal phases.
Weird category. Compounds between group 13 and very electropositive metals like sodium or calcium. Not really alloys. Brittle, poor conductors. Electrons transfer to the group 13 element, forming negatively charged networks or clusters, zintal ions.
And finally, organometallics. Boron and aluminum bonded to carbon.
Organoboron compounds, Br3. Made by hydroboration or from Grignard reagents, often pyrophoric. Lewis acids. The tetraphenylbarite ion, BPH4, is a big non-coordinating anion, useful for precipitating large positive ions.
Organoaluminum.
ALR3. Often dimers, like Al2CH36. They have bridging alkyl groups with those 3-center 2-electron LCl bonds, just like dibaranes hydrogen bridges. Triethylaluminum is a major industrial chemical, used in Ziegler-Natta catalysts to make polymers like polyethylene.
Wow. Okay, that was a serious deep dive into group 13.
It really covers a lot of ground, doesn't it? From boron's unique cluster chemistry.
To aluminum being so fundamental to our world.
And then seeing that metallic character and the +1 oxidation state take over for gallium, indium, and thallium.
Yeah, the applications are incredible too. Super hard stuff, semiconductors, catalysts, even medical uses. Way more diverse than you might guess just looking at that column on the periodic table.
It really shows how understanding the fundamentals, electron configurations, bonding types, periodic trends, unlocks the explanation for all these materials and their uses.
Absolutely. For any students listening, connecting those dots between the basic principles and the real-world chemistry is key. It's not just memorizing facts, it's understanding why.
Exactly. Why does Pyrex resist heat? Why is thallium poisonous? Why is gallium arsenide good for phones? The answers are right there in the chemistry we discussed.
So, a final thought to leave you with. What other everyday materials or technologies around you might be hiding equally fascinating chemical stories just waiting for their own deep dive?
Something to ponder.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We really hope you enjoyed exploring the incredible world of Group 13 elements with us.
On behalf of the entire Last Minute Lecture team, thank you for joining us.
Keep learning, stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.